Why on earth would you want to use a mortgage advisor in today's day and age? Everything's online. Surely you can find your own rates. You can find out exactly what you need to be borrowing. It's a great question that somebody asked me the other day, and I thought maybe we should cover that. So I'm going to try and do a few more sort of live events where we just jump online and answer some questions. So what I want to do today is cover that. What is a mortgage broker? More importantly, what do we do? Why should you bother? We're going to do that right now. So I don't really have that many slides to go through on with this. It should be really simple to explain what we do and how we do it. So if I can remember how to use this. So the first one is obviously going to be knowledge. And you kind of think, well, it's a mortgage. Surely I just get the cheapest rates. I just get, the lowest monthly payment. That's as easy as that. And actually, it really isn't. Actually getting the cheapest rate generally isn't the best way of doing it. Unless you can fit yourself into what we'll call a very small box. So you are employed with an employer that everybody knows that you're going to take your mortgage up to the age of 65. There's nothing sort of obscure about your application in any way, shape, or form, including the property you're going to be purchasing or anything like that. Then you may just come across something or come across a rule or a criteria that lenders just don't like. So, for example, I'll give you an example of. Let's take high voltage power cables. There are actually lenders in the UK that ask their valuers to check for high voltage power cables. And if there is a high voltage power cable too close to the property, they won't lend. Now, who on earth would think that is even a thing? Now, when it comes to this type of stuff, in fact, I think probably what we'll do, maybe I'm just going to I'll probably get told off for this, but what we'll do is I'm going to share my screen actually, and I'm going to show you some of the things that we use that helps us have a look to see what sort of lenders criteria are, and just so I can show you the vast amount of criteria that exists. So let me just pop this on the screen and let's see if we can make that a little bit bigger. So this is one of the systems that we use. And like I said, I may get told off for this. And we'll just use something like, I don't know, construction workers, for example. So this will show us what different lenders and the policies the different lenders have got. So as you go down, it tells us the various different policies, and each one is very slightly different. And as you go down, obviously you get some lenders that kind of accept things. You need to speak to them to find out exactly what it is, and you'll get to the bottom where actually there's lenders that don't accept them at all. So if you approach one of those lenders and you're employed in one of those ways, actually you're not going to qualify. So you'd have gone through and made an appointment with that bank's mortgage advisor. You'd have gone and sat through their appointment. You'd have provided all of your documentation, and when it gets to it, and when it gets to actual underwriting, and they work out that you're on a CIS scheme or part of a construction industry, you're going to get declined. And that's not because there's anything wrong with your application. That's just because the bank just doesn't like that type of lending. And that's just, and I know the first thing anyone is going to think is, well, it doesn't matter because I'm not part of a construction scheme. But just look at them. Let's just pick Barclays as an example. Just look at the sheer number of different criteria points that exist in you. So even sort of what type of proof of income they'll accept, and there are banks out there that unless you can prove your income purely on a pay slip, they just won't consider the application. And you think, well, why wouldn't you have a pay slip? Well, there's loads of reasons you wouldn't have a pay slip. You could have just started a job. It could be anything. We've actually got lenders that will lend on the back of an employment contract that hasn't even started yet. But unless you know these things, then it's really hard for you to sort of pick the right lender. So when it comes to going online and doing whatever it is you need to do online and finding yourself the cheapest rate, how do you know that that you're not going to get declined for something stupid. I mean, let's just go down this list. And flying freeholds. Ever come across that term? And again, there's rules around these, and every single lender will have a slightly different rule. So go back to what I was saying before I got sidetracked and started talking about systems. It's the knowledge, because I mean, I've been doing this job now for 15 years plus or whatever it is, and there's still things that come across and actually surprise me. And things that are completely ludicrous. Now, some of these things, don't get me wrong, we are able to challenge the bank and change their mind and get them to do something else. But that's not always the case. And as much as it should be, banks do tend to wind themselves in knots over lots of things, and sometimes we can help them out and say, right, actually, let's just try and explain this. So knowledge is definitely one that you should be thinking about. And experience. If you are looking for somebody that's, or using an advisor, for example, that's only just been employed or just qualified as an advisor, it's a bit like passing your driving test. We all know that, yes, all right, you've got your driving license and off you go and happy days. But actually, it's not until you actually get out on the road and start driving on your own that you really learn stuff. So an advisor's experience, I think, is really important in all of this. How many types of what types of applications do they do? What types of things have they come across? We've sort of had a really sort of specialist background. So the weird and wonderful is kind of our cup of tea, if you like. But unless that advisor knows what they're doing and can provide that service, then it's really difficult. But I suppose the idea of this video is, how can you do this on your own? And really, I found this really difficult. So what I did was, I thought I would jump on to, well, I won't name them because I'll probably get told off for it, but we'll call them the well-known comparison site. And I jumped onto their mortgage section, and we came across this. Now we'll make this just a little bit bigger so that everybody can see it. And there's just a couple of flaws already in this form, and that's just because of the way mortgages work. They are pretty complex, and fitting them into a form is really difficult. So, for example, the first one up there is, what is your annual income? And one of the things it says on there is, if you're self-employed, enter your most recent year's earnings. Now, given we've just gone through COVID, there's a good chance that your most recent year's income is going to be higher than what your last one is. If you've got a good business and everything, then hopefully that's the case. Your most recent years is going to be better. But there's not very many lenders that will just look at your last year's income. They tend to average it, and they tend to average it, say, over the last 2 or 3 years. And when you do that, and when you start to average your income, actually, what the lender will consider that your earnings will be less. So I've put £50,000 in there, but if we averaged it over 2 years, let's say the average came out at £30,000, you're going to be able to borrow a lot less than £50,000. So putting £50,000 into that calculator is going to give you a result that may not really be right. So, and again, an advisor would know this, but you've got to spend the time to try and work those things out. So when you get onto that comparison site, or you then need to go on to the lender's website, and you've got to go try and find their criteria. And I did try this, actually, going onto their criteria pages and trying to find this information, and it was actually really difficult. So we've got sort of systems and stuff where it's easier. Well, probably not easy. Easier for us to find stuff, and I couldn't do it on a consumer site, and I kind of knew this criteria existed. So it's really important. What else is on this this form? So, do you receive any bonuses? And again, bonuses are a really weird one, because, okay, you can put a figure in there, and it's asking you what you had over the year. But again, different lenders will take bonuses into account in a slightly different way. Some of them will take it into account, but only half of it. Some will take 100% of it. So the outcome you're going to get is going to be really, really difficult, and the criteria that goes alongside it, again, is very different. So to answer, what do we do, or what does an advisor do? An advisor takes all of these things into account. They've got the experience to be able to understand all of this. And then just think of time. So it's taken, I mean, like I said, well, we've been doing this 15, 16 years or whatever it's been, and that's a lot of time that's built up, putting in probably thousands of applications over the time, over those years. But how long would it take you to do that? So have you got the time to be ringing around and going to different lenders and asking them different questions about criteria that you may not even know exists? Um, and normally the answer to that is, well, probably not. So isn't it better to have somebody to do that for you? And this really does come down to the whole, if you've got a legal problem, do you get a solicitor or do you deal with it yourself? If you've got an accounting issue, do you try and work that out yourself or do you go and get an accountant? And the answer to that is you can sort a legal problem out on your own, or you can try. And it's the same thing with accounts. You can try and do that on your own. But can you do that as well as one of those professionals? Would you think you'd have a better chance of a positive outcome if you went to a solicitor or if you went to an accountant? Purely because they've got the time and the experience to be able to do these things. I'm guessing that you're still going to be working whilst trying to juggle, trying to put these applications through and ticking the right boxes and sending them the right documents. And documents is another thing. Is, you've got to consider what you're sending these lenders, because they get really picky over when they get stuff they don't want, because you send something in, they've got an obligation to look at it. So if they only ask you for 1 month's payslip, just send in 1 month's payslip. Simply because if you send in 3 months payslip and there's something that's not quite right on those on say payslip 3 or whatever, they will look at it and it can affect your application. So if you were off sick or there was something else on there, they are far more likely to come and question you on those things when really you didn't need to, because they didn't ask you for it. So be careful of what you're sending in. And I suppose the biggest thing that everybody always thinks of when it comes to, it's a mortgage broker, he's going to charge me. Well, not everybody charges. So there are some mortgage brokers out there that do not charge. But again, like this little illustration that we've got on the screen, then, you can either have something good. Let's do that again. So you can either have something good, you can have something cheap, or you can have it fast. But what you can't have is all three. So if you want something, cheap and you want something fast, then there's a good chance it's probably not going to be good. If you want something, cheap and good, it's probably not going to be fast. And that's the idea of it is, yes, we charge fees, but there are brokers out there that don't. But we look after the customers and make sure that we only take on a certain number of customers to be able to ensure that we can service them. And that's important because, as everybody knows, mortgage advisors, everybody might know, mortgage advisors get a commission from the lender, and everybody kind of gets the same amount. It's not quite a level playing field, but you kind of get the same amount. So if we are receiving, or if your advisor is receiving less because they're not charging, they've got to make up for that somewhere, because we've all got businesses to run and costs to pay. So the only way to do that is to take on more applications. And so if you're not paying your advisor a fee, you've kind of got to think, right, well, he's making up for the money somewhere. Where? What am I missing out on? What could be better? And I'm not saying that all advisors who don't charge are going to do a rubbish service, because that's total nonsense. Obviously, that may not be the case, but maybe it's not as quick, or maybe they haven't got the experience that some brokers have got. So it's well worth considering. So I think hopefully that goes through what an advisor does. We sort your mortgage out for you, approach the right lenders in the right way, and hopefully get a positive outcome. And sometimes things go wrong. So just today, we've had an application that declined with the lender that we originally put it with, just purely based on their algorithm or credit scores changed. And we were able to flip that straight into another lender. So we don't have to wait for a call back or wait for an appointment with a bank, sit on the phone for 30, 40 minutes telling an advisor something you've already told somebody else 3 or 4 times before. We can just literally pick that application up and put it somewhere else. And again, that's the role of an advisor, is to make sure that these things go through as swiftly as they possibly can do. And that's really it for now. So yeah, thank you really very much for the questions. If you do have any comments on this, pop it in the comment section below. And if there's any sort of questions or anything that comes up, then that would be great for one of our next videos. So yeah, for now, thank you very much.